fairground showman. He had the idea of bringing in rock groups to play in various clubs. They had this formula. It was a huge nonstop show, hour after hour, with a lot of people lurching in and the other lot lurching out. And the bands would play all the time to catch the passing traffic. In an American red light district, they would call it nonstop striptease. Many of the bands that played in Hamburg were from Liverpool, Norman went on. It was an accident. Bruno went to London to look for bands, but second year at Lakeside, the school started a computer club. The Mothers Club at school did a rummage sale every year, and there was always the question of what the money would go to, Gates remembers. Some went to the summer program where inner-city kids would come up to the campus. Some of it would go for teachers. That year, they put $3,000 into a computer terminal down in this funny little room that we subsequently took control of. It was kind of an amazing thing. It was an amazing thing, of course. Huge Bonneville power station in southern Washington state. TRW desperately needed programmers familiar with the particular software the power station used. In these early days of the computer revolution, programmers with that kind of specialized experience were hard to find. But Pembroke knew exactly who to call. Those high school kids from Lakeside who had been running up thousands of hours of computer time on the ISI mainframe. Gates was now in his senior year, and somehow with software billionaires and rock bands and star athletes, they seemed like the rule. Let me give you one final example of the hidden opportunities that Outliers benefit from. Suppose we do another version of the calendar analysis we did in the last chapter with hockey players. And this time, we'll look at a list of the 75 richest people in human history. It includes queens and kings and pharaohs from centuries past, as well as contemporary billionaires like Warren Buffett and Carlos Slim from Computing Center. For years, every hacker and electronics whiz had dreamt of the day when a computer would come along that was small and inexpensive enough for an ordinary person to use and own. That day had finally arrived. If January 1975 was the dawn of the computer age then, who would be in the best position to take advantage of it? The same principles apply here that applied to the era of John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie, and drew additional information from them. Once he even called Bill Hewlett, one of the company's founders, to request parts. Jobs not only received the parts he asked for, he managed to wrangle a summer job. Jobs worked on an assembly line to build computers and was so fascinated that he tried to design his own. Wait, Bill Hewlett gave him spare parts? That's on a par with Bill Gates getting unlimited access to a timeshare terminal at age 13. It's as if you were in yet, the voiceover began. Meet Chris Langan, who many call the smartest man in America. The camera did a slow pan of a stocky, muscular man in his 50s. The average person has an IQ of 100, the voiceover continued. Einstein, 150. Chris has an IQ of 195. He's currently wrapping his big brain around a theory of the universe, but will his king-sized cranium be enough to take down the mob for $1 million? When his winnings reached 250,000, he appeared to make a mental calculation that the risks of losing everything were at that point greater than the potential benefits of staying in. Abruptly, he stopped. "I'll take the cash," he said. He shook Saga's hand firmly and was finished, exiting on top, as we like to think geniuses invariably do. Just after the First World War, Louis Terman, a young professor of psychology, into the early writings of famous authors. They could find no difference. All the signs pointed, he said, to a group with the potential for heroic stature. Terman believed that his termites were destined to be the future elite of the United States. Today, many of Terman's ideas remain central to the way we think about success. Schools have programs for the gifted. Elite universities require that students take an intelligence test, like, say, the American Scholastic, proved that someone with an IQ of 170 is more likely to think well than someone whose IQ is 70, the British psychologist Liam Hudson has written. And this holds true where the comparison is much closer, between IQs of, say, 100 and 130. But the relation seems to break down when one is making comparisons between two people, both of whom have IQs which are relatively high. A mature scientist with an adult IQ of 130 not good enough. The ones who are good enough get put into a hat, and those who are not good enough get rejected. Schwartz concedes that his idea has virtually no chance of being accepted, but he's absolutely right. As Hudson writes, and keep in mind that he did his research at elite all-male English boarding schools in the 1950s and 1960s, knowledge of a boy's IQ is of little help if you are faced with a formful of clever boys. Let me give you another. This is what's called a divergence test, as opposed to a test like the Ravens, which asks you to sort through a list of possibilities and converge on the right answer. It requires you to use your imagination and take your mind in as many different directions as possible. With a divergence test like this, there obviously isn't a single right answer. What the test giver is looking for is the number and the uniqueness of your responses. And what the test articles and thrive in business. Several ran for public office, and there were 2 Superior Court justices, 1 municipal court judge, 2 members of the California state legislature, and 1 prominent state official. But few were nationally known figures. They tended to earn good incomes, but not that good. The majority had careers that could only be considered ordinary, and a surprising number ended up with careers that even Terman considered failures. We weren't treated well there. They just decided that my family was a bunch of deadbeats. To stick up for himself and his brothers, Chris started to lift weights. One day, when Chris was 14, Jack Langan got rough with the boys as he sometimes did, and Chris knocked him out cold. Jack left, never to return. Upon graduation from high school, Chris was offered 2 full scholarships, one to Reed College in Oregon and the other to the University of Chicago. It made absolutely no sense to me when he left that. Without a degree, Langan floundered. He worked in construction. One frigid winter, he worked on a clam boat in Long Island. He took factory jobs and minor civil service positions and eventually became a bouncer in a bar on Long Island, which was his principal occupation through much of his adult years. Through it all, he continued to read deeply in philosophy, mathematics, and physics as he worked on a sprawling treatise